Hey, welcome back to the channel. It's Robert with Hush Performance on How to Yard Quick Tip. This 90 Integra has been in the yard for a few days. I didn't actually expect much to be left on it. A lot is still here. Most guys want the transmissions because they're going to mate that to some other B series. In this case, if the engine was good, we would just grab the whole swap altogether. But I think this is an excellent candidate for what I'm about to explain. When all of us started getting into this, the only way that you'd be able to get everything that you needed was to get an entire swap. We're talking transmission, intermediate shaft, axles, hardware. All that stuff wasn't readily available, or a lot of our friends didn't have that stuff laying around as much as they do now. But when you have the new guys in a new generation, they don't understand all of these things. What they're trying to do is just save some money. Oh, I'm gonna buy a block and then I'll buy a transmission later and I'll just piece it all together, not understanding the true value of getting everything at once. For example, say if you or somebody who thought you wanted this transmission, and I'm just gonna get a transmission and I'm gonna bolt it on to something else later on, no big deal. Well, there's a few things that were left behind. This right here, this is the clutch cable transmission bracket. I see these left on DAs all of the time, and in my best summation is they don't know how to remove the cable. They wouldn't charge you any extra for taking this. This would be bolted onto the transmission. In most cases, that would just be part of the transmission, but you need this. So unless you happen to have a cable transmission already, you're going to be missing this, and then you're going to be trying to hunt this down. I'm going to take this. They left a ton of meat on the bones for us here. Even though the transmission's not here, there's a ton of stuff still left. For example, we have a distributor that's still on here. When you see like it unmodified, unmolested, everything stock, you know it's a winner. Here's something else that they left behind was the vehicle speed sensor. These are valuable. A lot of guys are looking for these regularly. They left this behind. In most cases, they're not going to charge you extra for that either. That would be part of the transmission. Also, this T-bracket right here, if you're putting this engine or style of transmission into an EF, you would actually need that. Because we're going to pull the motor out, we're going to attach it to keep it attached to the engine, and in most cases they're not going to charge you extra for that either. Another thing right here, if you're putting this motor into a B series, we have a post mount bracket right here. We'll need that. So if this goes in an EF, the EF mounts are based off of this post mount right here. That is also a valuable part. Also, we have a throttle cable. If you're putting this in an EF, we're gonna grab the throttle cable off of this car too. We're not gonna cut it. We're just gonna twist it off of the firewall and pull it off. Another thing that they have left for us is the knuckles. If you have an SI or a DX model EF, your hubs will work. But if you have an HF model, you are gonna need the larger hub. We're already here. We're gonna pull this whole thing off. Most junkyards though, they do kind of beat you up on the price of a whole knuckle because they see the knuckle as one, they see the rotor as one, and they see the caliper as one. And if you don't get it all, you're gonna end up having to source it anyways. This is gonna be your best rate. Looking closer, they left us an entire engine harness. This is going to be valuable to somebody, and in most cases, if you just unclip it from the body and roll it over the engine, they're not charging you for that. But that really depends on the yard that you go to. This resistor box too, what we're going to do is leave it plugged on the harness, and we're going to take this off. If you're putting this engine into an EF, you're going to need the resistor box for the injectors. When deciding whether I was going to take the engine or not on any vehicle, I will end up rotating the crank. If the crank rotates well, chances are it doesn't have a spun rod bearing. And if I feel compression as I'm rotating it through, then that means the timing belt's intact. This one looks like somebody had already gotten into here and the nuts were removed off the valve cover. So I just took a quick peek and it is beautiful in there. They took the gauge cluster, so we don't know how many miles on it, but this right here looks like a total score. Take a look at the interior. It looked like it was well maintained. I feel like this is going to be a total winner. Also, the pedal assemblies. Since we're here, we do get these quite often for guys that have Acura Integras that are auto and they want to do a manual swap. We'll source these and they'll be listed on our eBay page. If there are hoses intact, in my opinion, try to grab them all the way off from where they end. When you're putting this into an older car like an EF, chances are this stuff is going to be too short or a different size. And if it's in good condition, just grab it because they're not going to charge you any extra. It's just going to be attached to the engine. The fuel line as well. You'll find out if you're using the older B-Series style fuel rail that it's going to be shaped a little bit different than your EF. You're going to need this anyways. It's right here. It's attached to the motor. They may not charge you for it. Go ahead and just leave it on. There's rear hose also, this heater hose. It's formed and shaped for this particular motor. This looks like in really good condition, although it does look original. I bet it's gonna come off of that heater hose. It's gonna come off of the heater core pretty well, and we may end up needing it in our swap. So just go ahead and get it, it's right here. There is something else I don't normally take, and that's the carpet, but I was just reaching in there to do the pedal assembly, and I'm looking at this thing, and it was just too nice. Now, maybe in the video it'd be hard to see how beautiful this carpet is and how like unworn it is. I would imagine that this car has very little miles on it because it looks so good. This is going to clean up so well, and I wanted to get it out before the assembly so that I wouldn't get it any more dirty. So when I get it back to the shop, this is going to clean up, and somebody that wants a black carpet interior is going to love this. It is so nice. And if you try to get an aftermarket one, they make them, but they're not form fitted, so they don't look very well. They don't go over the exhaust tunnel very well, and anybody that knows wants an OEM. To get it out, I wish I could tell you how I've been learning myself. A lot of this center console is going to get out of the way, but once I get that out, then we'll work on the assembly. The rear discs on this would also be something you'd want to grab, which would include the discs, the caliper, and the entire control arm, the rubber hose, and probably the most important is the e-brake cables. Motor's out. This is what it should look like. You'll have the harness draped inside there, the throttle cable draped up inside there. Check this out. It even has a Honda oil filter. It being that old, that means this person really cared about their motor. Look right here. It's got a new water pump on there. I didn't pay attention to see if it was a Honda water pump, but the fact that it's got a Honda oil filter on it, man, I wouldn't be surprised that this was Honda Acura serviced. The rear main seal looks great. It looks OE. It almost looks like as if it's been replaced before. Man, this thing is looking really good. I'm really excited to get it back to the shop and do a compression test on it. We got our carpet, we got our motor, we have our front knuckles complete assembly, we have our 5-speed manual pedal assembly, we have our vehicle speed sensor, and I decided to grab the radio because it was in there. It looked like it was in good condition, but it was also wired in very well, and it did have this adapter. I do have a DA that I could put this in, and that would make it really easy. They're relatively cheap right here at the junkyard. We're not going to take the rear discs today. A lot of factors play into that: time and cash flow. Our business cost us quite a bit to operate, and cash flow is always an issue, and some of the stuff may take a while to sell, so I have to be strategic on what I buy. A lot of times you'll want to buy stuff that you know is going to sell right away. The older B18s like that might take a little bit to sell. The front knuckles might take a little bit to sell depending on how I price it. Pricing has a lot to do with how fast something sells. So there's market value, and then there is you need to get it sold because you need more money to operate value. All right, we made it back with our engine here at our shop. One of the most common questions I get asked is how I do a compression test outside of the vehicle. And in my opinion, it's pretty simple, but I'm gonna show you what we do. Here's a B20 that we set up for a compression test not too long ago. Right here we have the bell housing of a B-Series manual transmission. It doesn't necessarily need to be a manual, but this is what we do have. And the reason we need at least a bell housing to bolt to the block is because we need a starter. The starter is then bolted to a flywheel that we have on the crank. The starter is going to turn the flywheel, and that's what's going to build compression in our engine. And depending on what you have available, you could either set power directly to a car battery by itself or a running vehicle. In our case, we're going to use this jump box right here, which is going to send 12-volt signal to that starter. This right here, your power lead is going to connect to the starter. This spade connector right here is what jumps the two. So when we tap it with power connected and a ground, the starter will turn and then rotate our motor. We're all hooked up. Positive to the terminal there. We got a ground, and then our spade connector we're just going to jump over, and hopefully I don't get scared too much here. So now we're spinning. Just remember that I do have a flywheel attached to that. That's what the starter is grabbing and spinning the crank with. Now we'll set up the compression gauge. In my opinion, that is really good right off of the bat. There's no oil in there. We didn't drop any down in the cylinders. That's a dry hit with the throttle body closed. And what that means is if the intake valves were leaking, the throttle body would hold some of that compression back. That's all that would mean. But it didn't change with opening the throttle body. That thing looks great. And pretty much that's it. That's what we do all the time. You could do this also. There is something that I do often check before I pull motors, and that's dropping the oil pan. I'm looking for debris in the oil pan, because even if the engine rotates, it could have been knocking just a little bit. That's happened to me before. By dropping the oil pan in the yard, you'll be able to see if there's bearing material in there or see how clean it is. Often you could get scared because you'll see some RVT down in there that's worked its way off of the valve cover over time, or off of the oil pan that just kind of broke off and fell in the bottom of the oil pan. You might see some stuck in the oil pickup, but that's generally not anything you need to worry about. I didn't do that on this engine. I don't know why, but normally I do that. But that concludes it. This could be you. You could see yourself doing this all of the time, whether you wanted it just for yourself or you wanted to start your own business doing this. It's gonna take some time. It'll take tools you'll learn over maybe a couple of months or a couple of years. Just stay proactive. There are gonna be times where you get a bad motor. That's just the name of the game. Thank you for watching. We do have an entire series right here on our YouTube channel called How to Yard. Make sure to check those out, subscribe, and check out our website at hushperformance.com. And like always, happy tuning.